2022. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Hopefully we're not here all night. If you care to join us, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First item on the agenda is appeal number 3122 for 1106 Coneyland Road. We have received a request for another extension. Is there anyone here representing the applicant? Okay, so I think we had discussed we are going to grant the extension. To the extent we can fit them on the April meeting, we will. If not, they'll be pushed to May. And then we'll just follow up on that. All right, the next appeal, number 3124, applicant Christopher Steinhauer, property located 117 East Laurier Place and zoned R1 residential. Applicant seeks a variance from section 280-112D and section 280-112E of the code to permit disturbance of and improvements upon steep slopes in connection with the construction of a pool and related improvements. Applicant seeks a special exception under section 280-112N2 of the code to permit the placement of a stormwater management trench in steep slope areas. Welcome.
Good evening, Greg Edelman here on behalf of the applicant, Mr. Steinhauer. I have some pre-marked exhibits I'd like to hand out just to try to make this go as quickly as possible.
Thanks. $31.24.
Yeah. Excellent. Again, if I can go back on the record. Let the records reflect that I've handed out a package of exhibits, pre-marked exhibits A1 through A11, which I will go through via testimony this evening.
Greg, are you with the Kaplan firm?
Yes, I am.
Got it.
I am here for Mr. Brosman this evening. I like to think that I print out less paper usually than George, although this is George's paper, so I apologize now. And we'll try to make this as brief as possible, but as you stated in the notice of this proposed application, Mr. Steinhauer is proposing to construct a deck and pool in his rear yard, which has some steep slope areas that consist of more than 20% in slope. In fact, they're 21%, so they're very close to what the very steep slope limitation is in the ordinance. And I have with me this evening Mr. Chris Puzinas from Bowler Engineering. He's our civil engineer to testify this evening. I can run through his testimony with him very quickly on what's being proposed this evening. And then, of course, we'd be happy to answer any questions the board may have. But this is a pretty simple proposal. I think it's similar to ones that have come before this board previously for other residents. One very recently, actually, I think, end of December, you had one with the Horowitzes who were seeking to put a deck and some steep slopes in their rear yard, very similar, that this board granted. But if there's no further questions, I'd like to call my witness and go through the testimony very quickly.
Sure.
Thank you. Chris? And also, just for the record, Exhibits A1 and A2, I believe, were submitted already to the Township. But again, for the record, A1 is a copy of the Zoning Hearing Board application submitted February 14, 2022, and A2 is a copy of the redacted deed.
And we'll use the exhibit numbers that you have set out here.
Perfect. Great. Thank you very much. So, Chris, I'd like to show you Exhibit A3, which is a copy of your resume. Are you a licensed or registered professional engineer in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania?
Yes.
Okay, and do you regularly engage in civil engineering, zoning, and planning?
Yes.
Okay, at this time I'd ask that the board accept Mr. Prezinas is an expert in civil engineering.
Accepted.
Thank you. So, Chris, if we could go through, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 plans here. Exhibit A4 is an existing conditions plan. Exhibit A5 is a previous steep slopes exhibit. Exhibit A6 is a zoning plan. Exhibit A7 is another existing conditions plan with steep slope disturbance areas. And Exhibit A8 is a site grading and E&S plan. Did you or your firm, Bowler Engineering, prepare all of these plans?
Yes.
Okay, and if you could please just, in more of a narrative form, walk the board through the existing slopes on the property, where the property is located, and what's being proposed, which requires the variances and a special exception in order to build it in the steep slope area.
So the property is located.
Mr. Chairman, is he using the handheld mic?
That's good.
Oh, here's
That's
one.
not necessary. Do you want to come over here?
Yeah.
Here you go. Here's a handheld if you want it.
Got it. Yeah, so I was moving the top mic.
Thanks.
If you would stay with it.
Okay.
Yeah, you go over there, so she can go over here.
Sorry.
Awesome.
Okay. So the subject property is located at the corner of Laurier Place and East Laurier Place. It is a corner lot, so
I'm
it ha-
sorry, Chris, which exhibit are you looking at?
I am looking at A4, the
A4.
existing conditions plan.
Thank you.
Yes. Sheet 3. So as I said, the lot's located at the corner. It has 2 front yards and is approximately 30,000 square feet. The existing slopes are divided roughly halfway through the property. Some of it slopes towards the north, some of it towards the south in the roads. You can see that there's some gray hatching in the rear of the property in the northeast corner. Those are the areas of steep slopes. The lighter hatch is not regulated. That's below 20%. The darker hatch is the area of concern where we're seeking a variance, which is above 20%.
And Chris, if we can just jump to, I think it's Exhibit A7. Just take them out of order real quick. And if I can just ask you, is Exhibit A7 the plan that shows the slopes that are subject to regulation that require a variance and special exception?
So this exhibit shows only the slopes greater than 20% that are regulated based on the previously approved grading plans from the original development and when the deck was done. So we've isolated it down to these 2 portions. The section in the rear of the house is approximately 500 square feet, and that is sloped at 21% approximately. And the area to the right is slightly steeper, but that's only 150 square feet and very similar to what was previously approved as part of the original development.
Okay, and if you want to then go back, sorry to take you out of order, but back to Exhibit A5, and if you could walk the board through how you arrived at what slopes are subject to regulation and which are exempt.
So again, on this plan, you'll see the light gray and dark gray, which is based on the current conditions. We have also overlaid a red hatched area and a blue hatched area. The red hatched is the area from previously approved plans where the slope was shown to be greater than 20%, which we would normally be allowed to disturb. You can see that some of it does overlap in the eastern portion of the site, and that is why it is reduced on the Exhibit A7 that we were just looking at when you compare it to the original existing conditions plan A4. So that's how we limited, or showing that we're limiting the area we're asking for the variance based on what was previously approved and what we're going to disturb now.
Chris, let me ask you, so the red and the blue, these are areas that you consider to be exempt because they were subject to a grading permit?
Correct.
And do we have a grading permit?
It's from the original subdivision plans for the development from 1996.
Is that an exhibit?
I
I don't believe we have the
Yeah, we didn't.
original subdivision plan as an exhibit here.
Okay.
And I'm being told by my client that their copywritten here at the township, but they are of record here in the township's files.
Okay, thank you.
You do have a portion of it. This
Is it in the application, I
It's
believe?
in the application. A portion of it was included.
So in this actual application, A1,
Yeah, I thought I
it's
saw
an exhibit to that. Hold on. It is Exhibit C. Has the grading and utility plan from the original Laurier, the DeMoss Tract plan,
Okay, I see it.
and that covers the subject lot.
Got it. Okay.
And so I understand you're contending that those man-made slopes are in some way not subject to our zoning ordinance? The disturbance of man-made,
We would argue that they're man-made slopes which would allow you to grant the variances. This testimony from Chris, as he's stating, is these were previously approved, so they're not subject to regulation now because they've already gone through the approval process. So we're not asking the board to exempt man-made slopes. We're asking the board to take note that they are man-made slopes, which would certainly lessen the burden in terms of determining that we're entitled to a variance, and my client's entitled to a variance.
thank you.
You're welcome. Go ahead, Chris, I'm sorry.
So that, I think that establishes the area of steep slopes that we're requesting the variance for as part of a disturbance. So I would next go to Exhibit A6, which shows the improvements being proposed as part of this project.
Okay, and if you could detail what's being proposed here and how this design has changed over time to reduce the encroachment into the steep slopes as much as possible.
So there is an existing deck that was built that is currently in need of repair and going to be removed as part of this project. And we will be shrinking a portion of the deck to make room for a swimming pool, patio, spa, and pergola. In order to have everything fit on the site, we had to reduce the size, partially based on having 2 front yards and the constraint for the maximum impervious coverage. So we have reduced the size of the pool, which is shown as 16 feet by 36 feet approximately, whereas we would normally propose something on the order of 20 feet by 40 feet. And we have also moved the spa to be into the pool slightly, again, further reducing the footprint and disturbance area. As part of this project, we're also proposing stormwater management, which you can see is on the eastern side of the property. It is just a rectangular box outside of the decking area and the pergola that's being proposed.
And that's labeled as proposed infiltration trench?
Correct.
Okay. We go to Exhibit A8. And which plan is A8, Chris?
A8 is our site grading and E&S plan, which shows the proposed grading, erosion sediment controls, and the rest of the drainage needed for the stormwater management system.
Okay, and does this plan also overlay the proposed improvements on the sloped areas?
Yes.
Okay, and what areas are impacting what we believe to be the regulated slopes that are 21%?
A portion of the spa, swimming pool, and pergola in the back corner of the house. And as part of the special exception, we also have the stormwater management system, which is impacting the slopes in this area to the east.
Okay, but the remaining portions of the improvements and grading are not in the regulated slopes, correct?
Correct.
In your opinion, is there any way to access the rear of the house for any construction without going through the steep slope areas?
No, the driveway is located on the eastern side of the house, which is where access will be taken from.
Okay, so you'd have to cross those steep slope areas to get to the rest of the backyard.
Yeah, to do any project or construction in the rear of the house, you would have to disturb those areas.
Okay. If we go to Exhibit A9, which is an aerial, could you please locate where the proposed residence is located on this aerial?
The bottom center of the page,
Okay, where the,
the pin says 117 Lawyer
Okay.
Place.
and is the proposed, or are the proposed improvements consistent with the improvements adjacent in terms of pool and decking?
They're actually smaller than the neighboring projects that were done for the swimming pools and decking.
Okay. And if I go back to the application, I believe there's some photographs of the property, is that correct?
Yes.
All right, so if we go back to the application, Exhibit A1, Exhibit F attached to A1, and I'll give everybody a chance to catch up. There are a number of photographs of the house, isn't that correct?
Yes.
And if we turn to the third photograph, could you please describe for the board where that's taken from and what it shows?
This picture is taken of the rear of the house. On the left-hand side is where the steep slopes are shown on the existing conditions plan that we would be disturbing.
Okay, and those slopes look pretty gradual, isn't that correct?
Yes.
All right, and is that the existing deck that's proposed to be removed?
Yes.
Okay. And if we go to the last picture in that set, could you please describe, it's got a jungle gym or a swing set in the center. Could you please describe where this is taken from and what it shows?
This is taken behind the house. The rear of the house would be to the right-hand side. So you're looking at the steep slopes, kind of where that shadow area is.
And again, is this a very gradual slope, in your opinion?
Yes.
Okay. Now let's go over the variance relief that is required. If you could please highlight it for the board.
We're requesting a variance from 280-112D to permit the disturbance and improvements within the steep slope area, 280-112E for the removal of vegetation within the steep slopes, and a special exception from 280-112N2 for the placement of the stormwater infiltration trench within the steep slope area.
Okay, and will the proposed improvements comply with all applicable building coverage, setback, and impervious surface regulations?
Yes.
And do you have an opinion as to what's being proposed would have any type of adverse impact to public health, safety, and welfare, or detract from the use of the surrounding properties?
In my professional opinion, it will not have any impact.
Okay, I have no further question for Chris.
Any questions from the board?
Yeah, I just have one question. Have there been discussions with the township yet with respect to the location and construction of the storm sewer?
Yeah, we had submitted and got one round of revision, or one review from the township engineer. He only brought to our attention the steep slope issue, but was fine with the stormwater system otherwise.
Okay, because I would point out that the special exception that you're requesting under 280-112 and 2 requires the approval of both the township engineer and the DEP. So I just want to make sure you're aware of that as well.
And are you familiar with that process, getting approval from Pennsylvania?
Yes.
And what is that process?
We would submit to the county conservation district to
Okay.
get their approval.
And when does that happen? Before you start?
Yes.
All right, so that would be contingent on that happening.
Okay.
Yeah, and the ENS plan that was introduced would be, I assume, reviewed by the county. With any comments they come back with, it would have to be revised accordingly, so.
Okay.
In addition, there was one thing I have failed to mention. Mr. Steinauer had reached out to his homeowners association and did receive approval. There's a copy of an email from the president of the HOA board that's attached as Exhibit A11, attesting to that fact.
I have some questions. First of all, you're going to restore the grade as it is now over the trench and the stormwater system?
There's a little bit of grading shown to direct the water into an inlet that we have there, but it's generally going to be the same as it is now.
And secondly, did you look at other orientations of the project? For example, a simple rotation in 90 degrees would keep it out of the steep slope area.
We did look at different layouts for the project. Since the grading goes back towards the rear of the property, it ends up introducing higher retaining walls in that case, which is not desirable since the client is building this pool for his family. We were trying to avoid having any additional hazards.
Thank you.
And if the board does have questions, I have Mr. Steinauer is here as well, and he's happy to answer any questions the board may have with respect to what's being proposed.
Well, I don't know, maybe you can answer this, but any direct neighbors and any feedback?
Sure.
I understand the condo or the townhouse association, but is there any direct neighbors?
Sure, and I could have Mr. Steinauer come up and get sworn, and he can respond to
Okay,
that
great.
directly. Please. And use the mic, too.
If you raise your right hand, do you do solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth and the truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
State the full name for the record, please.
Christopher Steinhauer. Hi.
Hey, Chris.
So I have 3 surrounding neighbors that I have spoken to. I spoke to Randy Solari, Sam Glickman, and Ali Feinberg. They are all aware of the project and all in support. I reached out to them prior to submitting a change request to our HOA.
Okay.
So, yeah,
Are they your surrounding neighbors?
they're all my surrounding neighbors,
Okay.
correct.
Okay.
Any other questions for me, or?
Anybody have questions?
We did everything possible. I know there's mention about shifting the pool. In order to fit within the building envelope, we're literally within 1 foot of how the dimensions that we can place this. Our deck is rotting, so even to replace our deck, we would have to cross over the steep slope area.
All right.
So there's really no other way to access the property.
Okay, understood. I don't have any other questions. Thank you, Chris.
And
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Sorry, I believe that there was a letter in the file I forwarded to the board. I'm trying to find the electronic copy, but I think that there's a letter in the file on this from a resident.
Okay.
I believe they were objecting to the access to the open space corridor along the stream, which I don't think this changes anything, but
We would not be going across the open space. That's the whole reason we have to come in through the garage. So the open space would be if you came in from the backside over here, which is the reason, the only way to access the backyard is through the driveway, going over the steep slope area, because you can't come in through this side. There's steep slopes here as well. And then behind here, you have the open space.
I thought you had an open space corridor for the stream.
There is an open space for the stream.
The stream adjacent to the property, between you and the 200 whatever house, where they have all those stones piled up.
Well, we wouldn't be anywhere, we wouldn't be touching that area.
Okay.
That's in the rear, all the way. It's basically a row of hedges that block the stream.
Thank you.
Are there any other further questions? If there are none, I'd like to move for the admission of my exhibits A1 through A11. into the record.
So moved.
Thank you.
Is there any public comment? Okay, now I'd ask from the board if someone wants to make a recommendation.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that the applicant be granted relief from Section 280-112D and Section 280-112E of the code to permit disturbance of and improvements upon steep slopes as indicated in the testimony and plans, and in addition, to grant a special exception under Section 280-112N2 of the code to permit the placement of a stormwater management trench in a steep slope area.
Could we add on condition of meeting the requirements of that subsection?
With the special exception being subject to meeting the other requirements of that subsection.
Jamie, thank you. Discussion? Anybody? Any questions? Well, I think it, thank you for the presentation.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
for being here tonight.
You're welcome.
I think there's a lot of elements of this that helps me get there as far as supporting your application. And if assuming everything is as we have seen it, I mean, there's certain de minimis aspects of this in my mind. So I would support the motion.
Thank you.
No other comments. We'll have a vote. John?
Aye.
Jamie?
Aye.
Rich?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
And I'm in favor.
Great.
It has passed unanimously.
Thank you.
Congratulations on your project. Good luck with it.
Thank you
Thanks a
very
lot.
much. Appreciate your time this evening.
Absolutely. All right, next up, we have applicant, appeal number 3125, the applicant Daniel Takafman, is that correct? And Angela Shen, property located at 515 Brookside Avenue in Zone R2 Residential. The applicant seeks relief from Section 280-76A and Section 280-896A of the code relating to the flood conservation district and the riparian buffer setback. Applicant seeks a variance from the aforesaid provisions of the zoning code or such other relief consistent with the exhibits and testimony presented at the hearing. Welcome.
Evening, Nick Cornelia representing the applicant. These two testify.
I do. Daniel Takafman, T as in Tom, A-K-E-F-M-A-N.
This is an application, as you can see by the application. This is the site plan for the site engineered by Momini and Associates. The house on the site is over 100 years old. I believe Maurice, who will testify also, the architect, has records indicating it dates back to at least 1908. The property is non-conforming in that the structures are located in the riparian buffer setback as well as in the floodplain, at least a portion. The property, as you'll see, is here in this area, as I'm showing on A5. The floodplain comes in the bluer type line. So the floodplain is over in this area, which basically is where the garages are. The area where the main house is not in the 100-year floodplain as determined by Momini engineers. There is a stream located in this area, and as you see, the existing structure already has an area in the riparian buffer setback. Also located in the riparian buffer setback is the garage. The proposal is to move the terrace further from the riparian buffer setback remove the garage out of the riparian buffer setback, as well as reduce impervious coverage both on the site as a whole, as well as in the floodplain conservation district. First witness is Mr. Takefman, who is the owner of the property. And Dan, you've been sworn in. I'm going to show you what's been marked as A2. Is this the deed to the premises indicating that you purchased the premises with your wife Angela back in 2018?
That is correct.
And who do you live there with currently?
My wife, Angela Shen, and 2 daughters.
And, okay. And you heard testimony, or at least my opening statement regarding the location of the various property. Have you done any improvements to the property, any structural improvements to the property since you purchased it in 2018?
No, we haven't, other than a minor hole put into the bottom back corner of the garage to help with all the flood water to let it drain out of the garage. The garage is right in the way of where all the water rushes in from the street, and hits the garage and tries to get around the garage or through it.
So is that one of the reasons why you are moving the garage, is to move it out where the floodwaters tend to?
Correct. So the driveway here, the water all pretty much comes through on each side of the driveway, goes through the middle of the property, hits the garage, tries to go around the garage. We are also have a stormwater drain that goes right next to the side of the side terrace here. And that has been failing, and we just got approval from the township. They're going to replace the stormwater drain, but it abuts our side terrace, which is sort of part of the timing of changing all this, because we had to give an easement to the county.
To the township.
I'm sorry, to the township, and the moving of the side terrace will move it slightly out of the easement and also away from the creek.
So the easement to the township, the purpose of it is for repairing the storm drain or replacing it, and it includes other areas. It will service other areas beside your property, is that right?
Correct, the storm drain. Unfortunately, even with the new storm drain, we're still going to have flooding issues. So we're just trying to do what we can to get out of the way of all the flooding water that comes into our property.
Okay, I'm going to show you A3, which is an aerial photo. Can you point where the house is that you own?
So hopefully I'm looking at this right. This is the house, and then the garage would be right here.
And you see, is this the stream in the back?
And that is the stream in the back, yes.
And here's the road?
Yes, and this is Brookside Avenue.
Okay, you mentioned the water, the stormwater runoff. Where does that, in what direction does that stormwater runoff generally come from?
And I think you have a slide, and you'll see another one in a little bit, but all the water is pretty much coming down Brookside or coming down Askin Road this way, and this is our driveway, so it sort of comes on each side of the driveway and down the driveway through the middle of the property.
All right, I'm going to show you just A4, which is another aerial of the house. Is that your property?
That is our property, yes.
And there's the roadway, correct?
Yep.
Okay. Seems like in the back, at least, it's heavily treed and buffered.
Yes.
So your proposal here is to move the garages outside, out of the riparian buffer, is that right? Setback?
As much as we can, and again, to try to get it away from the water, which one of the largest nuisances is just all the buildup into our garage of all the debris and flooding of our garage.
And this area here where the terrace is, that's going to be moved further from the stream bed, is that right?
It will, in slightly different shape, yeah.
Okay. That's all I have for Mr. Takefman. Maurice will testify. He's the architect on the project.
Hello. I do. Maurice Edwin Weintraub, W-E-I-N-T-R-A-U-B, M-A-U-R-I-C-E. Edwin, yeah, Maurice Edwin Weintraub.
Maurice, what is your profession?
I'm an architect.
And how long have you been an architect?
40 years or so, over 40 years.
What's your educational background?
I have an undergraduate degree at Penn State and a graduate degree at Penn, Master of Architecture.
Are you a registered Pennsylvania architect in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania?
Yes, I am.
And have you appeared previously before the various boards of this township and other townships?
Yes.
And have
Not
you
to say this board, but
and have you testified as an architect on those?
yes, yes.
Did you prepare the drawings for this application?
Yes, I did. Well, I can specifically say what I prepared and what was
Okay.
prepared by others.
Actually, the A5 was prepared by Mominy, is that right?
Yes, correct.
What's the age of the property or the age of the home and structures on the property?
There is an article from Philadelphia Suburban Homes in November of 1908 that chronicles this structure. You will see a photograph of it from that article. So, and there's also a companion house next door. If you guys are familiar with this property, they're kind of mirrors of each other.
Now, I'm going to show you Whispered Marches A8, and you've heard the testimony already from Dan regarding the stormwater. Could you describe what A8 represents and where you were able to obtain that?
Sure. Just one thing. I have some stuff that I could project. Is there any way to, because it would.
If you want to do it on the computer.
It would be better if I can get the computer.
By all means, if you can do it.
Yeah, no, it looks like the gentleman in the box just did it.
Unfortunately, we're not the help desk, so we
I'm starting to get a little nervous there, Maurice.
If I have to rely on you guys. Okay, so, oh, thank you. You're gonna, okay, thank you, Kevin. So, here we are at the same illustration.
Okay.
And basically, there's two issues that occur at this property. One is the overflow of the stream, which is oddly enough less of a concern. The bigger issue that they're plighted with is the water that comes down from the intersection up at Conestoga. And if you look at the way the contours are and the arrows are, a tremendous amount of water flows through all those properties. I trust you've heard comments from them in the past. And unfortunately, goes right through the property where we've been talking about, and the existing garage, plus or minus from the 1930s, almost acts as a cup to capture the water. And as well, what happens is there's a shed next to the garage with a space through it, and water actually gets funneled through that and shoots out into the stream during these events, as well as through the garage.
Now, Maurice, I'm going to show you his A6, and I think you may have some.
No, I have
if you want to pull it up,
everything here, and
but
it's-
I'll put it on the board, and if you could just tell us what A6 represents, and there's a number of photographs.
Okay, so,
You prepared this, I assume, too.
yes, this I prepared. For simplicity, I've gone through, these are all, oh gosh.
Yeah, me.
This is why I like my own computer. I'm trying to zoom in on this. Here, I'll get it. Isn't there? Yeah, there's another thing that I was hoping, yeah. Yeah, no, there's something that's not here. This isn't the way, working the way I'd like, but anyway, this is picture number one, and this is the front of the house, approximately near the driveway as you enter the property. This is the rear of the house. This shows the existing deck that we hope to replace. This is the side of the house. This shows that side terrace that it's been discussed. And down here, you see the pipe. This pipe went through the property, and somehow there was never any agreement with the township. It's just been through there since whenever, and as part of this process that's been alluded to, the Shen Takefmans basically have granted the township an easement to replace that pipe. That pipe is clogged, and what happens, there's a grate out at the street, right at the base of their driveway, which doesn't drain. So the replacement of that pipe will help the puddling that occurs in front of the house. That's, if I'm not mistaken, one of 4 routes from the police station to get out to the township. So the fact that water floods in front of the house, now, as was said, this will not solve the flooding problem. It will alleviate the normal rain occurrence and prevent, hopefully, flooding in the street. This is from across the stream. This is the back of the house, and this is the side view of this terrace that is in question as part of this. This is from the front of the house. Again, the same terrace. This is an existing pond, little koi pond. This is the garage here. It's hard to tell, but the way the light's coming through is showing a space between the 2 buildings. Here's a shed, and then here's a canopy area. Basically, water moves through the garage and through that space, as I said. This is the front of the garage.
As a result of the water moving through the garage, Maurice, what's the condition of the garage?
Well, you know, this started by, do we repair the garage? And that's associated with a lot of problems, just the fact that you're doing this in a floodplain. So the thought was, why not try to get it out of the way as much as we can? This is the back of the garage, and in the foreground here you see the stream that comes around. This is one of several pictures from that article I referred to earlier. Actually, it's quite an interesting property. The front that we look at now is actually the back originally. There was a gate on Old Orchard that the remnants are actually still there. If you know to look, they're low, they've been knocked down. But one would get dropped off there via carriage, walk along a boardwalk on the other side of the stream. It was covered with a trellis, all in like sycamore type wood, I believe. And then it came to a bridge. You cross that bridge where there's this little kind of lighthouse feature. And at that point, you either go to the house on the right or the left. Anyway, I don't know how that relates, but it's just interesting. Okay. Where is that plus and minus again? Okay, minus. Okay, do you want me to?
Yeah, why don't we go to A, referring to A7, and was this also prepared by you, Maurice?
Yes.
And if you can start, if you can show where the floodplain delineation is located on the plan.
I have to say I'm hampered by this. I'm much better on my own thing. This drawing tries to assess 2 things. One is the amount of impervious that we will be removing both from the site and from the floodplain area, and then talks about what we'd like to add back. What Nick was just saying, this line here is the floodplain line. And you'll note that it wraps around this existing structure. This line here is the pipe that goes through. These lines here show the 10-foot setback that should be from the stream. And this shows the line of the riparian buffer. You can see here that here the garage, the space, covered space between the garage, the shed, and the covered area. So basically, water moves through the site, both from the driveway and along the trellis, and moves like this, and goes into the garage, forced out here, and through the garage here. This dashed is what we'd like to propose for the new garage. And we pushed it out of the riparian zone.
And just going back, Maurice,
Yeah.
you mentioned where the floodplain line is and what areas in the floodplain and what areas not in the floodplain,
Everything over here is in the floodplain.
to the left of that line.
To the left of that line. And again, oddly enough, flooding from the stream just grazes this path at times. And oddly enough, flooding from the stream never comes up to the garage. It's water that's coming down through the property that is the issue here.
If we can we address the existing terrace first? I believe A6 shows that terrace as being one, how? I believe-
Are you talking about, which one are you?
The terrace.
Yes.
The existing terrace, according to A6, is 1 foot 10 inches from the stream bank.
Yes, the existing, that's correct.
And the existing terrace appears to be 139 square feet within that 10-foot riparian buffer.
Exactly. There's 139 square feet.
And just for the board to know, there's a riparian buffer zone for primary structures, and there's an area for accessory structures, such as garages and terraces. And for the accessory structures, the riparian buffer's 10 feet. So that's why we kind of indicate the one being the 10-foot line, and then the one being the actual riparian setback line.
And then along that line, the existing garage is 4 foot 7 inches away from the bank of the stream.
And you'll be moving that entirely out of the riparian buffer zone?
Yes. We're removing all this structure and other impervious, like there's a concrete walk here, and this is a compressed gravel apron, all that that's within the riparian buffer will be removed.
And then also, as we had mentioned, currently 139 square feet of the terrace is within the riparian buffer, and your proposed, which is an A7, indicates a reduction of that, correct?
Yes. This is what's, I suppose this is the existing wooden deck that has a rail, and this is a terrace that sits on grade, surrounded by a low wall and a fireplace at the end. What we're hoping to do is to create a retaining wall that holds earth and then would support patios, so to speak. And this is, conceptual. It's a kind of what I call plinth concept. Part of the idea is to make it so the wall doesn't drop more than 30 inches. That would require a rail because they have this beautiful view that then gets masked by a rail, so to speak. I guess.
So,
Can I just,
Yeah, sure, sure.
I think
Yeah,
I
sure.
understand it, but,
Yeah.
so you're removing the wooden deck,
Yeah,
you're reducing the size of the existing terrace, but you're really connecting what was the wooden deck.
yes, absolutely. So I guess these two diagrams associated with the upper part of the drawing quantify all the impervious that we would like to remove from the site. The second calculation is here's the line of the floodplain, quantifies all the structures that will be removed from the floodplain area. Now, when we go back down, we have companion diagrams. This shows the impervious that we would like to add. And unfortunately, this isn't clear, so I can't relay the numbers, but the delta is about 650
Maurice,
square feet
you can
less.
perhaps look on the plan here.
Yeah.
And it may show you. So if you can tell the board the amount of impervious currently and how much is going to be reduced, both in the floodplain and in the riparian.
So from the site, Yes.
This is A site.
Yes. From the site, we're removing 4,128 square feet. From the floodplain, we're removing 2,950 feet. Then again, when we add, we'd like to add 3,470 to the site with a delta of, we're reducing by 658 square feet the impervious on the site. And then we go down to a companion diagram where we're removing 694 square feet from the floodplain. Let's see. Is everything clear? I mean,
Yeah, I really have nothing else to add, you know,
First off, you're accepted as an expert. And welcome to the zoning board. Never been here.
okay.
Any questions from the board? Seeing none, any questions, public comment? Yes, sir.
oh, I'm sorry.
You have to swear me in? All right, I might get the itches. I hope I don't catch on fire or something.
Raise your right hand. Establish the order
Yes.
and say your full name
Ted Remel,
and spell that.
Reimel, first name Ted, Ted. While I'm completely in favor of all this, I live next door in the companion house. My biggest concern is not with the garage or not with, you know, anything, is that this has been a very treacherous area as far as flooding is concerned. And all the water pours down their driveway, you know what I mean, and it puddles in the front yard. So my question is, while the garage and all that sort of stuff is easy, the question is, are we going to do regrading? Are we going to be doing things? And what's going to be the impact as this new water gets released and as it comes down? As long as we're, you know, conscious of the fact that this is a, you know, real tipping point, you know what I mean? That, you know, all the water's that's going to be released. And I feel for you very much. In their front yard, it pools like the best water retention basin that you've ever seen, right? But the question is, if we recontour and stuff, and it's not a water retention basin, and it's not getting directed this way and holding and doing all these horrible things, where's it going to go, and what's going to happen? Because I'm right next, you know, downstream, and I don't have an issue. Do you know what I mean? But it's right at the point where I don't have an issue, right? Like if I have to, you know, and that's going to be the thing, is that, you know, I understand there's a whole plan in effect, you know, to get all this done, but this is a really, I mean, you've seen pictures when this thing gets rolling. I mean, there's a lot of water. So I hope you can get this done. The idea of moving the garage certainly seems to make sense. I'm completely not an expert in this field whatsoever, you know, but I'm just making sure that we're all being, you know, cautious and making sure that, you know, all the contours and how we're letting the water rip off and all that sort of stuff just doesn't create problems downstream. And I'm sure they're going to be courteous. They're wonderful neighbors, and it's certainly difficult to come up and say, hey, you know, I have a concern, especially in something that I'm uneducated on. You know, it's just water's water. And one thing I've learned is water doesn't stop. And once we make a mistake, you know, what this amount of water can do if we make a mistake will be, you know, pretty catastrophic. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Ted.
Thanks, Ted.
You want to address what regrading will be done, if any?
Well, I just want to say the grading associated with the garage, there's no intention to do any significant grading other than to get it out of the way. It just so happens to that side, if you look at the Mominy, I really would have done this a lot better if I had.
You're not being graded.
But this is kind of, if you look at the contours here, this is kind of the higher part of the site over on this edge. So that's why we're trying to kind of push it over. I guess that wasn't showing, so.
And additionally, Maurice, the applicant's going to have to do stormwater management, correct, in accordance with the township requirements?
Yes, yes, that's correct. In terms of the terrace, we're just lifting that piece of land, and as of now, that portion hasn't been underwater. And they moved, Dan and Angela moved in on beginning of August in 2019, was it? 2018. It was that flood that was on August 13th. So imagine moving into your new house, you're in there for 13 days, there was virtually no disclosure in the real estate.
Okay.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
hardship, that's,
Okay. Just request the exhibits may be made part of the record, please.
Yeah, accepted. Any other questions from board members? Does anyone?
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Just one quick question. At this point, these are conceptual plans as opposed to, I mean, how far are you into the ultimate process?
They would have to be within the footprint, obviously, but I'll turn that over to Maurice. Go ahead.
these are pretty much the plans. Yes. Yes. I mean, the garage was wedged in between the side yard setback and the riparian buffer. And the raised plinth concept is all pulled in from the floodplain and so forth.
Yeah. All right, do I hear a motion?
Sure, I'll make a motion to approve the application. I'm not sure how to phrase it, but grant the relief requested based on the plans and the dimensions that were presented to us tonight in the exhibits. That's the appropriate way to phrase it.
Very good.
I'll second.
Go ahead, John. You got it.
Second. Okay, discussion.
I'd like to congratulate you for the work you're doing. I was one of the original authors of the riparian buffer ordinance back when I was on the EAC. And I can assure your neighbor that Township's very well aware of this area. I know we did some work on Askin maybe 5 years ago because that was flooding very bad. And opening up this pipe again, hopefully they're going to go with a larger diameter, will make a significant, you'll be surprised the difference it makes.
A second one would be great.
That stream used to flood even worse than that. But we did a lot of work 6, 8 years ago with dredging and removing blockages. So I think it's a nice project and surprised it took you this long to do it.
Any other discussion for the board? Okay, let's take a vote, starting with John.
Aye.
Jamie?
Aye.
Rich?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, it's unanimous, it's approved. Good luck with your project.
Thank you very much.
Nothing else before the board, meeting's adjourned.